Welcome again, ladies and gentlemen, to the Big Tent, provided to you by the Alliance for Sustainable Colorado. We want to thank the Alliance, and we also want to thank Dig for providing the stage here today for our next panel. Our next panel is entitled Faces from the Front, Western Perspective on the Drilling Boom. It is a subject that is particularly close to my heart. Our next panel is sponsored by a diverse coalition of conservation and wildlife groups, the Wilderness Society, the Colorado Wildlife Federation, the National Wildlife Federation, the Colorado Environmental Coalition, and the Western Colorado Congress. This panel will attempt to address the impacts of the current gas drilling boom on the wildlife and rural communities of the West. The panel will be moderated by Jim Martin, who is the director of the Colorado's Department of Public Health and Environment. Jim has a long and distinguished career working on conservation issues in Colorado, including previous positions with Western Resource Advocates, Environmental Defense Fund, and also working for Senator Tim Morris. So please welcome Jim Martin.
Good morning, everyone. It is a gorgeous day in Denver and Colorado. But I want you to know, if you're thinking about moving here, it's never like this. But otherwise, it is a gorgeous day in Colorado. Welcome. It's going to be a great panel. We have a great group of people who are going to tell you about a number of different perspectives, their perspectives on an issue that is affecting a great deal of the Mountain West, the Rocky Mountain West. As Duke generously said, I'm Jim Martin. I'm the director of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and been working on energy, environmental, natural resources issues for 30 years, which is astonishing in its own right. Our goal today, I guess, is to talk about both what's happening and what we see as the path forward, how we find the right balance, how we make the transition from where we are to a carbon-constrained, or as Robert Kennedy said the other night, a decarbonized world. One of the misperceptions that I want to correct first off, though, is the notion that we might be going into or entering a boom in natural gas, oil and natural gas, but in this part of the West, mostly natural gas development. I was looking at statistics yesterday. By virtue of the fact that I serve on the Department of Public Health and Environment, I'm also a member of the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission here in Colorado, which regulates oil and gas development. I pulled up some of their statistics last night, and if you look to a decade ago, 2007, the state of Colorado issued 1,002 permits to drill for the entire state for the entire year. This year we are on track to issue 7,600 permits to drill for the state of Colorado. It is almost an exponential increase in activity in the state of Colorado. We don't expect it to slow down. We could see as many as 120,000 new wells here in Colorado over the course of the next roughly 20 years or so. And for those of you who have never been to the oil fields, it's important to realize that regardless of how many wells are at a well pad, whether it's one well or 32, for every well pad there will be a road or roads, there will be a condensate tank or two, there will be a glycol rehydrator, there will be a gathering line. So we're talking about significant development to pull up, to extract and produce natural gas here in the western United States. So, and that comes with it its own side effects. It fragments habitat unless you do it right. It can result in increased air pollution. It can result in all kinds of impacts to both the environment and to natural resources and to human health. So the challenge is to figure out how to do that right, where it should occur and where it shouldn't occur, and to find that right balance. And I think that the folks we're going to hear from this morning will give us their sense of what it's like living out on the front lines as they described it to me this morning. And ending with Randy Udall, one of the most perceptive observers of the energy issues here in the United States I've ever met, who I hope will paint a path forward for us to that decarbonized world toward which we're all working sooner or later. So I would like you to welcome our panel. It is a group of distinguished and terrific folks. I will introduce each of them more extensively as they get up to speak, but we're going to be joined this morning by Tweeti Blancett, who is a New Mexico rancher with, I think, boundless, maybe thousands of stories to tell, some good, some bad. By Wally, who is a county commissioner from Plata County, where there is extensive natural gas activity occurring. By Walt Gasson, and I want you to know that Walt is here despite having been bucked from his mule and injured a few weeks ago up in the Tetons, as I recall. And Randy Udall, who is, as I said, one of the preeminent energy experts here in the United States, and Randy's going to sit here, and I think Tweeti's going to lead off this morning. Tweeti Blancett, as I said, is a New Mexico rancher and activist. She really does live in the epicenter of natural gas development in the San Juan Basin, and in this case in New Mexico, although the Four Corners region is all part of that natural gas development. She's going to tell you what it's like working and living in that part of the country and owning a ranch where the surface is owned by one entity, namely Tweeti, and the subsurface natural gas by others. Oh, I'm sorry. I have completely missed my directions, but I've been corrected. You guys should have a seat because we have a couple of special treats this morning. We have two videos that we're going to go to. We're going to do one video now, and it's going to give you some more perspectives on life in the oil and gas patch. And then we'll go to another video at the end of this as well, a video by the National Wildlife Federation. This video is by the Wilderness Society, and I believe it's about 3 minutes, and I'm told it's fascinating. So with that, I hope I appropriately cued in the video.
An iconic landscape filled with rushing mountain streams, snow-capped peaks, rolling sagebrush seas, and pristine wildlife habitat. The Rocky Mountain West is home to some of the nation's most beautiful and rugged open spaces. The Rockies also play a role in satisfying our nation's growing energy needs, contributing significant volumes of natural gas and some oil. A sustainable energy future for America includes the responsible management of these resources, combined with serious efforts to increase efficiency, conserve power, and produce renewable energy like wind and solar. While drilling has been a part of the Western landscape for decades, and energy development is important to keep and power our homes and businesses, the current drilling boom is unprecedented, unsustainable, and irresponsible. In the past 7 years, escalating pressure from industry and a pro-drilling administration have created a tidal wave of new leasing and drilling, and degradation of the region's lands. For example, of the 85,000 wells drilled in Wyoming alone in the past 100 years, 26,000, nearly a third of the total, have been drilled since the Bush administration took power in 2001. However, this drilling frenzy has had no effect on lowering gas and heating costs for average Americans, with prices doubling in the last 7 years. Clearly, the administration's short-sighted drill everywhere approach is not working, and is not the sustainable energy solution Americans want. Wyoming's Evergreen River Valley, just south of Grand Teton National Park, is one of the areas hardest hit by the boom. Suffering dramatic changes to their western lifestyle, residents of rural Pinedale have most recently endured ozone pollution concentrations greater than those typical for Los Angeles, spurring Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality to issue several health warnings for the area. As drilling expands, a spider web of roads, pipelines, and waste pits accompany the drill rigs, spreading impacts across a much greater area than the wells alone. With nearly 300,000 wells drilled in the last century, today there are over 135,000 active wells in the Rocky Mountain region, impacting vast swaths of our western landscape. Such development is not appropriate everywhere. Heavy truck traffic, noise, dust, air, and water pollution, and the potential for leaks and spills all leave an enduring impact on the land, fragmenting wildlife habitat and transforming rural towns from farming and ranching communities to industrial parks. While responsible energy development will remain an important part of the Rockies, a continued headlong rush to drill everywhere will destroy the Rocky Mountain West as we know it. But there is hope. Some places in the Rockies are still untouched by energy development, and through the efforts of local landowners, hunters and anglers, farmers and ranchers, conservationists, and many others, incredible places such as New Mexico's Valle Udall and Montana's Rocky Mountain Front have been permanently protected for future generations. You can help too. Be a part of the solution, saving our iconic wildlands while providing a sustainable energy future for America. Act now.
Welcome. It's a bright sunny day and we're inside a tent. That didn't work as well as we hoped it would. So we're going to dispense with the second video, but encourage you to go to the Wilderness Society and the National Wildlife Federation websites where these videos will be available for viewing with a whole lot better resolution. But do visit them, because I think that was pretty good. As I said, our first speaker this morning is going to be Tweeti Blancett, a rancher from New Mexico with thousands of stories to tell. So please welcome Tweeti.
Good morning. Why, I want to thank you very much for inviting me here, and I bring you greetings from northwestern New Mexico. I am a member of a 6th generation ranching family. We've been on the land from the late 1800s all through the 1900s into the 2000s. We are now no longer ranching. Our ranch is completely fragmented by the oil and gas development, even though we're on a federal land grazing permit, which is a multiple use area. Our ranch covers about 30,000 acres, and it is in northwestern New Mexico, right at the Colorado line. It's the fairway of the largest producing natural gas field in North America. We turn out of San Juan Basin $8.2 billion every year in severance revenue. There's plenty of money to do it right. It just has not been done right. Now, in the split estate area, there's many ways that you can have split estates. Split estates can be private surface and federal minerals, private surface, state minerals, private surface, private minerals. What we have on most of our ranch is federal surface, federal minerals. We are your typical federal lands rancher. I think that we are the watchdog for the American public lands because we have a vested interest for the water to be good, for the forage to be good, not only for our livestock, but for the wildlife. The ranch that we are on, and there are CDs that are available through the Wilderness Society. Obviously, they're not showing up here any better than the video did, but you can go to those pictures and pull them up. So you say, after all those years, what are you going to do? Well, we don't pass on the legacy to our children and grandchildren because the ranch is gone. But what do I do as a person? Well, I form alliances with strange people, at least strange people for ranchers, because generally we don't form alliances with the Wilderness Society and with the Sierra Club and with the other environmental organizations. But this issue is so large that it really moves across the whole span of things. It's not a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a liberal issue. It's not a conservative issue. It's not a rancher issue. It's not a conservation issue. It's not a hunter and fisher issue by itself. But it's all of our issues together. So we have formed alliances across the Rocky Mountain West, and now, unfortunately, on the East Coast, to help protect some of our special places. Because we do not want the Rocky Mountain West and those special places back east to look like our ranch in the San Juan Basin of New Mexico. So you say, after you form your alliances, what do? You go to court. You stand up at events like this and you speak out. You go online and you talk about the issues. And you stand together as a group of people that want to protect something. Does that mean you're always going to agree? Absolutely not. But the issues that you can agree on, you leave on the table. So you wonder, who can you trust? Well, let me tell you something. You definitely cannot trust your elected officials and the government entities that are supposed to be enforcing the regulations, because our ranch is a perfect example of that not happening. Most of the time you can't expect very much out of your local elected officials because they have a lot of pressure on them. But what you can depend on is people like you and I standing together for a common interest. And really, if this issue seems so big that you can't get your hands around it, it's not. Any bigger than the women's suffrage issue, the abuse by the railroads, the abuse by the coal mines, the women and the children in sweatshops, flooding our lakes and streams, clear-cutting our forests, open pit mines. It's no bigger issue than those were. And we as Americans bonded together and said no more. So that's what we have to do today. We have to stand together and say, I don't care if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat or a liberal or a conservative. This is an issue that we want protected and we want saved. And if we stand together, we can't win. Thank you.
So a year and a half or so ago, the Colorado General Assembly heard from a lot of folks from all sides of this issue and began looking at the data and concluded that the natural gas boom was well underway in Colorado, and that perhaps a new approach to managing oil and gas development, and as I said, it's principally natural gas development, is needed here in Colorado. And because of the fact that I sit on the Oil and Gas Commission, I've had a front row seat to the efforts on the part of that newly reformed commission. When our governor took office, one of the first bills he introduced was a bill to reform the composition of that commission. But we have been working now for almost a year to reform the rules under which oil and gas occurs in this state, trying to take into account efforts, the need to balance development with protection of wildlife and wildlife habitat, assuring protection of air and water quality, and so on. We're still in the middle of that process, so I can't tell you what the end story is. But Wally White is a county commissioner from Plata County. That is a county that's in the middle of coal bed methane development in the same part of the country from which Tweeti hails. And Wally is a party, his county is a party in those proceedings that he's offered, I can certainly say, a lot of cogent and helpful advice to us in that proceeding. He has a lot to say. So please welcome Commissioner White.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Wally White. I've been a La Plata County Commissioner for 4 years. La Plata County is in the southwest corner of the state, just north of Tweeti Blancett's ranch. We are in the San Juan Basin, and we produce the most natural gas of any location in the state of Colorado. We have a unique geologic formation there that allows gas to be pumped out much easier than some areas in the state, and consequently we don't have the same number of wells, but we have the highest production capacity. We have in La Plata County the strongest rules, local rules, governing the oil and gas industry in the state. And we've been encouraging other counties to try and follow suit to get some of these additional rules in place that will help protect the surface owners. And I might explain that surface owners or counties only can legislate for the surface owners. The state legislates for everything below the surface or downhole. So we have rather restricted abilities to protect our land and our people, but we do have very good regulations, and we've just submitted some change in language to the COGCC that Jim Martin sits on for the disclosure of toxic chemicals and the use of hydraulic fracturing. In April, we had an emergency room nurse assist a gas field worker who came in with his supervisor with some hydraulic fracking fluids on his boots. The odor was extensive and oppressive. They had to call a code orange in the emergency room and ventilate the area. Almost had to shut the entire hospital down. As a result, a few days later, this nurse, Kathy Bear, became seriously ill and spent the next approximately 2 weeks in the ICU there, recovering from liver and kidney damage, heart damage. To date, 5 months later, we still do not know the chemicals that affected her. The supervisor had an MSDS sheet which contained some information on the drilling fluids, but for the most part, they were listed as proprietary chemicals, which meant that there's no information available to personnel. The one mentioned there of the chemicals was phosphate esters. And all of her symptoms can be related to what little we know about the general term of phosphate esters. She's still in recovery, and we don't know whether or not she will be fully recovered. We don't know the long-term effects. The industry, the company involved in the manufacture of the drilling fluid, which is called Zetaflow, is the generic name, has refused to release the chemical composition which would enable them to then give her proper treatment. Much of this stems from an exemption that was given to the gas industry in, I believe, 04, 05 from the EPA, where the industry is excluded from the Safe Drinking Water Act, and it enables them to pump toxic chemicals into our environment, into the whole, and has the potential to affect our groundwater supplies and certainly the health and welfare of everybody that works with these chemicals. The gas field workers, in many cases, don't know what they're working with, and even those, in some cases, they do have to wear protective clothing. They have little or no knowledge of the chemicals that they work with. As a matter of fact, several weeks ago, the contractors who were hired to clean up the spill, which it took us several weeks to find out that the spill occurred on the Southern Ute Reservation and was a well that is owned by British Petroleum, BP. But the contractors who came in to clean up the dirt afterwards called Kathy Bear at home to ask her how she was doing and wondering what kind of physical problems she was having. And they expressed to her the fact that the next day after they had cleaned up this site, they were ill. They felt like they'd been on a drinking binge for a number of days, and they had no idea why, because they hadn't even had a drink the night before. We don't know yet what has happened with those young men who were hired to do this. Apparently they weren't given the warnings nor the equipment to protect themselves from the toxic chemicals. We really need, as I said, since counties only have a limited ability to protect our citizens, we need both state and federal help here. The administration has allowed the EPA to give exemptions for the use of toxic chemicals. The gas industry is the only industry in the United States that's allowed the use of these kinds of chemicals. We need to get that changed. There was a hearing held in, I believe it was October 31st in 07, Henry Waxman, an oversight committee that took testimony on this very subject. To date, we haven't seen any action on that. Hopefully with the new administration, we will be seeing a significant amount of change to protect the health and welfare of the citizens, both here in the state of Colorado, in Wyoming, and the rest of the United States where this type of energy exploration is going on. You know, we depend in La Plata County for 60% of our property tax comes from the gas industry. And they are instrumental in our economy, obviously. And we do not want to shut them down. We want to have them work as a good neighbor, to work with us as anybody would who cares about the people around them, who cares about the environment. We can do this better. The industry can do it better. We need to protect our people. We need to protect the environment. And only through real active participation by our state legislators, by our federal legislators, can we accomplish this. Thank you.
Our next speaker this morning is Walt Gasson. Walt, as I'm told, he's the only person I haven't met before, so I'm I'm relying on the information I've been given, but he worked for Wyoming Game and Fish for a number of years. They don't say how many, so a number of years, and is now the executive director of Wyoming Wildlife Federation. He has lots and lots of years of experience in fish and wildlife and habitat and managing and protecting both of those. He's going to tell us about how oil and gas development can affect fish and wildlife habitat and perhaps how we ought to do it right. Walt?
Morning. According to the agenda, I'm supposed to talk about drilling and how it's impacting wildlife, hunting, and the culture of the rural West, and what we can do to better balance energy with other important values. I'm supposed to do that in 7 minutes. Shoot, I can't say my name in 7 minutes. Let me use this time instead to suggest something. Let me suggest that the people of the interior West, when they, at some inevitable point, they stop this insane headlong rush to drill anything that's horizontal, when they finally realize at some point that maybe it wasn't such a great idea to sacrifice their birthright for a failed energy policy. When they finally wake up like a drunk on Sunday morning and ask themselves the question, my God, what have we done? But they will answer that question. Not in terms of a 46% loss of a mule deer herd like we've seen on the Pinedale Anacline in western Wyoming. Not in terms of 86% loss of sage-grouse like we've seen in the Powder River Basin of Wyoming. Not in terms of habitat fragmentation and destruction or anything like that, but rather that they will answer that question in terms of home. So instead of beating you to death for the next 6 minutes with conservation biology, let me tell you a story. I come from a ranching family in western Wyoming. They came there in the 1870s. Our outfit was established by my great-grandfather, who passed it on to his son, my grandfather. And the home place, our ranch headquarters, was located near the little village of Udall, Wyoming, on Craven Creek. The great influenza epidemic in 1918, my grandfather died. We lost our home place. Now, most of you may not be from around here. You're dang sure ain't from Udall, Wyoming, I can tell you that. So I'll pause to explain. When a Western family loses the home place, it isn't the same as going into receivership or being involved in bankruptcy proceedings. It isn't now, and it never was, about the loss of some old buildings and some broken down machinery and a bunch of cows and sheep or a bunch of old horses. It's much more than that. It's not even about the loss of your home. It's about the loss of your place in the world. The great Western historian Wally said that we need a sense of place, a feeling that there's somewhere where we belong, shared geography, shared values, shared experiences. So a Western family, the loss of a home place is the loss of all. It isn't just the loss of the place, it's the loss of the soul. And no greater tragedy can come upon a family like mine. The pain of that experience haunts my family to this day. But my family isn't unique. In the gritty little ranching and mining and railroad towns of southwestern Wyoming, families came from all over the world. For the last century and a half, people came to my hometown to make a living, to the state to make a life. And for most of us, that life, or at least a big part of it, was about hunting and fishing and camping and spending time in our families in the outdoors. Every Wyoming family has certain places that are specialty. The places that they hunt, the places that they fish, the places that they park their camper and put up their tent, the places they take their horses and ride their four-wheelers, the places they go to get their boots dirty and their soles clean. Those are the places that I speak of as the home place for each of us. They're the places we love, the places we live for, the places we bequeath to our children like some sort of precious family heirloom. Because what they represent to us in Wyoming in the 21st century are not just a sense of place, but a place of sense. That's the true price of drilling for gas in the West in the 21st century. The loss of the home place for each of us, for our children, and for our children's children. There isn't a week goes by that I don't hear from somebody in my community who tells me, you know, our family's doing great, we're making all kinds of money, but look what we're doing. Where am I going to take my kids fishing? Where am I going to take my kids hunting when we convert this entire state to an industrial state? I'm running out of answers to give. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. Maybe you don't even care. Maybe you and your family are never going to be out there on Little Mountain and hear the elk bugle in September. Maybe you're never going to smell the sagebrush at first light on Rice Lake. Maybe you're never going to stand on a butte in the Red Desert and be able to see 100 miles in any direction without a sign of human being. Maybe you'll never experience that silence so deep you can feel it in your soul. Let me ask you this. Do you think somebody should? Don't you think that freedom and wildness and vast amounts of open space with clean air and clean water still have a place in America? Even if you never see it, or touch it, or feel it, wouldn't you just like to know it's there? I'm not against gas development. The last time I checked, the furnace in my basement ran on natural gas. My friends are involved in gas development in Wyoming. We just want to talk about where, and how, and when. I don't think that's unreasonable. I guess that's why I'm here today. For me and for my family, and for most of the families I know in Wyoming, the loss of those home places isn't just about us. It's about you. It's about all of us. I heard Michelle Obama say the other night that we should never confuse the way things are with the way things could be. And I'm here to say today that the way things are after 8 years of failed energy policy absolutely cannot be the way things should be. I've been a professional wildlife manager for 33 years now. And I know that energy development is the greatest challenge to wild things and wild places I've ever seen in my state. And if we do not deal with this challenge proactively, incredibly, and responsibly, we will lose our home place. Your home place, my home place. It's just about that simple. And that's the point that comes. I have 7 grandchildren. 20 years from now, how do I say to them, I'm sorry, we lost your home place. You guys won't do it. And I hope you won't either. Thanks.
Well, I do know our next speaker. I've heard Randy speak on any number of occasions. I really do believe he's one of the most incisive, thoughtful, and smartest observers of both our energy present and energy future, and we're really pleased to have him with us. We're fortunate to have him with us this morning. So with that, Randy, it's all yours.
So there's a guy out there on the interstate right now filling up a big rig. He's hauling a load to Ohio or Missouri. He's buying 250 gallons of diesel. It's costing him, $1,000, $1,100. It's enough fuel to get him 1,000 miles, and then he'll have to do it again. $4 diesel, $5 diesel in parts of the West, and $4 gasoline has introduced a really intriguing dynamic into both the national and many Western races. The Republicans have this gift for coining phrases, and one of the ones they coined that is a really gifted phrase is drill here, drill now, pay less. And I've been intrigued. I mean, it's not clear to me whether blogging is typing or blogging is journalism, or blogging is gossip, or blogging is reporting. But I've been intrigued by both in the blogging world and in the mainstream media. How few reporters have asked themselves, well, how much drilling are we actually doing? And are we doing more drilling today than we were doing last year or a decade ago? And so here are a few numbers. In the next week, in the next 7 days, we'll drill 1,000 new oil and gas wells in the United States. In the next month, we'll drill more than 4,000. This year, we'll drill more than 50,000. Half of all the oil and gas wells drilled anywhere in the world this year will be drilled in the United States. So the Republican slogan, drill here, drill now, pay less, implies that we're not drilling. And that if we simply did drill, we'd be paying less. What's the track record on paying less? A typical American family this year will pay $6,000 for fuels of all kinds. That's double what they were paying. This is for oil, electricity, and natural gas. That's double what they were paying when President Bush was first elected in 2000. So not only are we drilling like crazy, drilling here, there, everywhere, we're paying more. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, what's going on? You know, if we are drilling at this frenetic pace, 3 out of 4 of oil and gas wells drilled anywhere in the world historically have been drilled in North America. Where is this drilling frenzy carrying us? And where is it not carrying us? Much of this drilling is happening in the Rocky Mountain West. We've drilled 100,000 wells here in the Rockies over the last 6 or 7 years. We'll drill 50,000 wells here in Colorado over the next decade, possibly more than that. In the region as a whole, by 2025, we'll have another 250,000 wells, or perhaps 300,000 to 400,000 wells in the region as a whole. And the reason is quite simple. There are only 10 American states that produce more energy than they use. 5 of them are here in the Rockies. The other 40 American states, from an energy perspective, are parasites on the states that have energy. Now, there's an interesting dynamic with natural gas in particular. If you think back to a cold winter night last winter, we were using about 80 billion cubic feet as a nation last winter, 1 dumpster's worth of natural gas per person each day in the U.S. Half of that natural gas is coming from wells that are less than 3 years old. In the next 3 years, we have to replace with new drilling more than half of the natural gas we were using last winter. And this is one reason we have seen such enormous pressure on western landscapes. This is the only part of the country, until very recently, where gas production was actually increasing. Now, something very intriguing has happened over the last few months. T. Boone Pickens is going to speak here later on today. So you have this Republican billionaire traveling the country spending $60 million of his own money. This is an oil man who has concluded that we cannot drill our way out of this problem, that instead we ought to do what Greens have been promoting. We ought to plant wind turbines like they were trees. Pickens' plan is very similar to a plan developed by the U.S. Department of Energy to get 20% of U.S. electricity from the wind by 2030. So what would that take? In the next 24 hours, we're going to complete 150 oil and gas wells in the United States. To get 20% of U.S. electricity from the wind, we would have to build 20 wind turbines a day, and we would have to do that for the next couple of decades. So we're doing 150 oil and gas wells. Could we do 1/7 as many wind turbines each day as we're now doing oil and gas? And the answer is clearly yes. We could do that. Vestas has come here, the world's largest wind turbine manufacturer, has come here to Colorado just in the last few years. Just recently they announced they're going to open 2 more plants here. They will now have a total of 3. They'll be employing at full hire, they'll be employing about 2,500 Coloradans. And I think Vestas internally has concluded that not only are the Americans going to plant wind turbines like they were trees, they have no choice. They have to do that. This is where we've come now. I think for many different reasons, global oil production is peaking, global oil exports are trending down. We have to get real about energy in a way that we never have before. We're sending $1 billion overseas every day to buy imported oil. It's essentially an energy plan that has no future. It's becoming clear not only to Republican oilmen like Dickens, but to Republicans and Democrats in Congress that the path we have followed, which has emphasized lots of drilling, very cheap fuel, and almost as a consequence, a highly inefficient energy system, that path is essentially cannibalizing not only prosperity but the global climate. And so the next 20 years in the United States are going to be very fascinating, and they're going to be grounded in two realizations. One, that it's not energy per se that drives an economy. It's the conversion of energy into useful work. And that's the explanation for the Japanese miracle. And if we want to remain prosperous here in the United States, we're going to have to conserve energy and use it much more efficiently than we have in the past. Today, we're using 700,000 barrels a day less oil than we were using 12 months ago. This is the steepest downturn in vehicle miles traveled that we've had in the United States of America since World War II. This is a highly unusual moment in our history. I would argue it's the most severe energy crisis we've had in our lifetimes. And the political response to it, I think you can hear repeatedly in the Democratic speeches that we're hearing at the convention. The political response is still somewhat halting. The rhetoric is there, but the policies to underscore the rhetoric are not yet completely in place. The wind energy production tax credit and the solar energy production incentive, both of those are set to expire in about 6 months now. McCain has not showed up 8 times to cast the deciding vote. Would it be one of the deciding votes to extend those credits? Let me end there, and I think we have a few minutes maybe for questions.
We actually have no time for questions because we are going to do a video, which is my way of making sure that everybody knows we're going to go to a video, and I'm going to read from this just to make sure I get it right. But we're going to see the video because even though those of you who are lucky enough to be in the big tent here in Denver for the DNC won't have a great view of the slides or the movie we're about to see, I'm told that the presentation is being live streamed on the Big Tent website and is going to be posted on YouTube, where the video, I'm told, looks beautiful. It's just what I'm reading. It's the bad lighting in the room. It's not just me. I want to thank all of you for being here. We're going to go to this video in just a second. I'm going to close with 2 quotes that I think are perhaps useful in summarizing what we've heard from some very eloquent speakers. One from Jim Schlesinger, who was the secretary of just about everything during the Nixon and Ford and perhaps other administrations, who said once, the absence of an energy policy is an energy policy. So we have some work here to do, but we also know from Wallace Stegner that those of us who live here in the West, who are really fortunate to live here in the West, have the opportunity every day when we get out of bed to build a society as great as our scenery, if I get that quote correctly. I think that Mandy has given us some sense of what that future could look like. None of us are unrealistic enough to know we're not going to continue producing natural gas for a while, but we can do it right. We can do it in the right places in the right way. We can find that balance, and we can build a society as great as our scenery. And with that, we're going to go to the last video, and if you have a computer with you, you should check it out later today, because I'm told it's great. That's my segue.
With all the roads coming in, it's going to look like a map of the city.
This is our place, you know, this is our main source of income, but it's also more than that. We've gone from having a pretty pristine, tranquil area with just cattle as being the main industry here, to the oil and gas. So lots of changes.
With all of the influx of the oil and gas industry, it has taken all of the pleasure and fun out of ranching. I'd like to be someplace where it's nice and quiet again, and I can run my cattle and pretty much be left alone.
When I first came back to the ranch, which I said I would never do, I was immediately confronted with negotiating with Williams, with Burlington Resources, with Gasco, with Canada. I was negotiating 3D seismics, 2D seismics, pipelines, surface damage use agreements. I was spending more time with lawyers and with corporate representatives for these massive corporations than I was really focusing on my own business.
We have gone on a juggernaut of development the last 8 years. We've done a lot of things wrong.
Unlike the ads that you see on TV, it is a dirty fuel. The extraction process is dirty. What it does to the communities is a shame.
What has happened? How could this happen? This is a Class 1 watershed, airshed, viewshed. I can't believe this is happening.
I'm personally torn as well. It's hard for me to represent one side of the community, and having grown up here and my family having roots here, I obviously don't want to see the mountains torn apart, but at the same time, I personally feel that we should be trying to use this resource that we have here to try to help us get our own energy independence.
And unless you're like living in an industrial zone or some other place like that, we got to start protecting what we're doing. Not necessarily protecting, but we have to start preventing the amount of environmental degradation we do to harvest various resources. That's not to say we got to stop doing that. We just got to start doing it in a way that doesn't destroy the area.
It's really important, I think, for the public to remember these lands belong to all of them. The wildlife that live on top of these public lands belong to the people of the state of Colorado, and they have a justifiable place to voice their opinion, to call upon the companies and the federal government to do a better job, to do it right.
Wildlife has to give more consideration when plans for extracting energy are made. And it's got to be there because it isn't right now.
I live in a place where there's low energy potential and high wildlife potential, and we have to take a stand somewhere and say, hey, you know, we understand we're making a sacrifice and we're providing for our country in a significant way, or we hope it's in a significant way, but we have to save a little bit of Wyoming here as well, because it's a special place.
All right. These fine folks will be available for any further interviews somewhere across the way. I'm not quite sure where, but you'll know where it is. But please thank them for their time this morning.